USA Football and is very experienced at training football officials and delivering officiating seminars. He's also worked the 2007 World Cup of American Football Championships in Kawasaki, Japan, and the 2009 World Cup in Canton, Ohio. During this tournament, Bill has been reviewing and providing feedback on game performances and conducting workshops for our officials in the hopes that they will improve alongside all of the coaches and players throughout this tournament. Gentlemen, I present Mr. Bill LeMonnier.
It's a good thing they gave me a platform to stand up on. This might be difficult otherwise, but great place to be. Thank you for the introduction. Got to use my notes, got to use my glasses. I'm a referee, you'll forgive me for that. It's not often that a referee gets asked to speak to a bunch of players and a group of coaches. That's kind of humbling. But we're going to take advantage of that opportunity and hopefully share some things that we have in common. First of all, as others have done, congratulations to all the teams, the players, the coaches, all the support personnel that go with it. This tournament has been very interesting, and as far as I'm concerned, no place I'd rather be than here right now watching football. This is kind of a downtime back in the States, so when the opportunity came here and some of the people that I've met from here, Tony Martin and the others invited me over, this was just a great, great opportunity to spread my wings again internationally and see some friends and see good football. So I've enjoyed these 6 games so far. Looking forward to a full set of football tomorrow. And again, as other people have said, best of wishes to each of the teams and stay safe. A little bit was mentioned, and I don't want to make this about what my experiences have been, but as was said, I've been officiating football since 1973. Some of you weren't a twinkle in your father's eye at that point, but it's been a long haul. I'm closer to the end of my career than I am to the beginning of my career. And that bothers me a little bit because a lot of people sometimes when I'm out doing these seminars said, boy, I'd like to be doing what you're doing. I'd like to be working in front of 100,000 people in Michigan Stadium or one of those places. I'd love to be doing that. And usually it's one of the younger officials. And I said, well, you want to trade places? And of course they say they do. I said, well, the only thing I want from you is your youth and to keep the knowledge that I think I have right now, because the end of my career is coming, and if you want to trade right now, I'll trade with you so I can do this for another 20 years. So, but it's a great place to be. What a neat way to stay active and involved in sports. If you can't continue to play, then you become a coach, an official, a trainer, something to stay involved. No better place to be than out on a field. I've officiated 3 sports over my career, though the only one I do now is football, but I was a basketball official for about 10 years. I did baseball for about 25 years. Baseball was the greatest sport in the world. You only had to be able to do one of 3 things: fair or foul, safe or out, ball or strike. I mean, baseball was about the simplest thing in the world. Football can be a pretty complicated sport to officiate. My hats are off to the officials here. I know players go through a grind and your coaches get on your cases and they push you very hard. But I'll bet if you sat down and talked with these guys, I think they're going to be glad to see me go home on Saturday, because when we're not out there on the football field officiating, we're back in the room, the classroom's over at the facility every day. And we've been going for 6-hour days, 7-hour days, maybe even 8-hour days over there. And I don't cut them any slack. And if you talk to them, they'll tell you that. We've had some great sessions, and the best thing about it is that just like anybody else, they're trying to grow, they're trying to develop. So we've been having a great time with that. I can look back to the first time I officiated a game. It was a youth football game back in 1973. I had played high school football. A friend of mine was a football official, and he needed another official. He was complaining that if he couldn't get another official, he and this other guy would have to work this game with just 2 officials. And I got tired of listening to him complain about working a game with 2 officials. So finally I said to him, what's the big deal? I'll do it, you know. I played in high school, I can officiate football. I watch the Bears all the time on TV, you know. And so he said, well, you're about my size. We'll come out on Sunday and we'll work the game. So I got dressed and I put this uniform on and I went out to the football field with the other two guys. And it was just, again, it was just like 10, 11, 12-year-olds playing the game. What's the big deal? And I realized what the big deal was the second that the kicker put his foot into the ball. Instead of playing it and trying to win it, instead of coaching it and trying to develop, now all of a sudden I was responsible for the game. And that's probably the biggest thing officials have to learn when they go out on a field or a court or a diamond, is that they're now responsible for the game. No longer it's about being a fan and being able to know everything, which of course all the fans do, but the fans don't have any responsibility to the game. You have responsibilities to the game, but it's to your team, things of that nature. But to be totally responsible for a game, for the safety of the players, for the fairness of how the game is played, it was like a light bulb went on, you know, because when that kid put his toe into the ball, I was saying, what am I doing out here? But the good thing was I had two good people around me. They helped me through the day, and they got me through it, and that's what started the officiating career. A couple of years later, I went out and I worked my first freshman high school football game. That would be the kids who were just starting high school, the lower level teams. I got to my assignment. There were supposed to be two other officials there with me to work three, and I walked into that assignment and I was the only one there. Now, jumping from youth football to high school football was a pretty big deal for me, you know. It was like, I thought I was going to the Super Bowl, you know. And here I am by myself. How am I going to officiate this game by myself? Well, I have to thank a coach back in Illinois, in the Chicago area, for helping me out with that. Because he saw that terrified look on my face. I didn't have to tell him it was my first game ever at the high school level. He knew it. He could read the fear in my eyes. And he went and he got the other coach and he said, listen, Bill's by himself today. He's got a tough job. We got to help him out. You tell your players when the play's over, hand them the ball. You tell your players it's yes sir, no sir. But whatever Bill needs, that's what you're going to do. So went out there that day, worked the game. Sometimes I stood in the backfield behind the quarterback. Sometimes I went to the line. I didn't know where to go stand. I was all over the field. But that coach, who was a respected coach in the area, he took and he set the tempo for that day. And those kids handed me the ball. It was yes sir, no sir. We didn't have any problems. And things went on. Years later, when I got into the Big Ten, I thought back to that time, back in about 1975. And if that coach, instead of taking and realizing that, you know, that was my first game, if he wanted to make that day miserable for me, he could have. And maybe I would have walked away from it that day. Maybe I wouldn't have had the opportunity for the experiences that I've had in my life because of officiating. But that coach went that extra mile to recognize that it's a total thing about the game. Yeah, his players were important, his team was important, and winning was important. But football is a family. And he realized, especially at the freshman level, that's a starting point for officials. It wasn't the Super Bowl, okay? It was to me, but he knew it wasn't, okay? There were other more important things. So how that coach treated me that day probably had a lot to do with me staying in the sport. If I would have been abused that day by myself, I probably would have walked away from it. There's probably some coaches out there that wished he would have abused me, so I would have walked away from it. But I've had some great opportunities with this. As I've officiated a lot of games, a lot of places, I very seldom remember the little things about a particular game, but I remember a lot of the great experiences I've had besides the officials that I've met. I've had presidents of the United States come out for coin tosses. I've had the Prime Minister of Japan recently come out for a coin toss in a game I did in Japan. I've had Army generals, other dignitaries, Muhammad Ali, a coin toss in Louisville. So I've had an opportunity to see and meet a lot of people that never would have had the opportunity to meet. I've had the pleasure to work the Ohio State-Michigan game 5 times. Can't get better than that. They were 1-2 in the country the last time, or 2 times ago when I had them. And it was just a phenomenal place to be. What I remember the most about that game, besides it being 1-2, and who was gonna go to the national championship, was that day I made a call against Michigan. It was a long third and 15 late in the fourth quarter, 3-point game. And the quarterback from Ohio State rolled out, threw an incomplete pass, but the linebacker from Michigan, a kid by the name of Grable, came across with a helmet-to-helmet contact on the quarterback, and we had a flag that kept the drive alive, 15 yards, first down. Ohio State goes down and scores. We're on a TV timeout, and Coach Carr from Michigan, who Coach Carr and I have had many opportunities to say hello during the ball game, but Coach Carr has this vein that's on the side of his neck that pumps out to about here. And I could see during the TV timeout, he was really giving it to my head linesman, okay? It wasn't anything my head linesman did. He was upset about this helmet-to-helmet call. So I've been called a lot of things said about me over the years by coaches. And I went over to save my head linesman because he was taking all the grief for me. So I stepped between my head linesman and Coach Carr, and I says, Coach, if you have something to say it to me. This man hasn't done anything. So he proceeds to brightly describe his feelings about the call. And he looks at me and he says, you know, if your mother and father were standing here right now, they'd have to show me the marriage certificate, because I don't think you're legitimate. Now, I've been called a lot of names, and including that one that begins with a B, that refers to being, you know, a child of parents who weren't wed. But that was probably the most unique, original way that's been said to me. And I looked at Coach Carr and I said, you know, Coach, if my mom and dad were standing here right now, they'd get a kick out of that. And he said, I didn't say it was funny. So you have to keep your wits, you know, and people say, you know, you could have flagged him for that. And I said, yeah, I could have flagged him for that, but it was one of the most original ways that anybody's ever called me that name ever. And I was just enjoying the moment, you know. You give them a little space, especially when the coaches are original. It's when they say the same thing over and over that it just gets old. But coaches come up with a new one and sing us. We sometimes even appreciate that. So please, you know, just get off of the old stuff. We've heard about not being consistent. We've heard about classes. We've heard about those things. You just got to be, you know, come up with a new one. We had an interesting one. We were up 2 years ago in Japan working a game, and there was a U.S. All-Star team that went to Japan. And the coach in the U.S., he was a little difficult, especially on the Japanese officials. And after the game, our crew of 7 officials and some of the support personnel, we went to a restaurant probably 10 miles away from where the football game was played, okay? Not expecting, with all the hundreds of restaurants there are in Tokyo, that we'd ever run into the coach and his coaching staff from the U.S. team. So we had dinner, we stopped back at the bar, and we were having a round or two, and we were running a tab. And who comes walking in the door but the head coach of the U.S. team and his coaching staff? And now he wants to be everybody's friend. Okay? Now all of a sudden the Japanese officials and everybody are, you know, we're the greatest guys in the world. He comes over and where we're sitting at the bar, and he says, I'm picking up the tab. This is on me. Get everybody some drinks. And everybody kind of looks at me because I know we've had a bar tab going that's probably about $200 at least US, okay? And he's just offered to buy us all another round, not knowing we already have a tab going. So we all ordered, graciously accepted, took the drinks, finished our drinks, and said, hey coach, you know, we gotta head back. Some of us have to catch planes in the morning, but you're square on this, right? Oh yeah. And he looks at the bartender and says, that's mine. That's mine.
Give him the big tab.
We leave the place, and all the guys are just kind of looking like this. Do you think he really realized this? He says, no, he doesn't know. You know? But paybacks are wonderful. So call me anything you want. I can find paybacks. Well, a year later, I run into this coach. We're back in Japan, and first thing he says to me when he sees me is, where are you guys going to dinner? I can't afford it. So we had a great time with that, and we appreciated Coach picking up the tab there. I had the opportunity a couple of years ago. I worked the Fiesta Bowl And it was a game between this little team out of Idaho called Boise State and Oklahoma. It has been regarded as probably one of the most magical football games ever in the history of college football, whether it's regular season or bowl season. And it was a special place to be that night. Little David there, Boise State, he was up against Goliath, and Oklahoma was supposed to pound him by 3 or 4 touchdowns. Even when we got the game, we're not supposed to care, and we don't care who wins the game, but there was that little thing there where you said, man, I hope this is somewhat close, because I don't think Boise can play with them. We were about 7 minutes into the ball game, and it was 14-0 Boise State. And all of a sudden you were saying, geez, I wonder if Oklahoma can play with them. Oklahoma got back in the ball game late in the game. We got down to the wire. There was less than a minute to go. And Oklahoma had just scored. And Boise State managed to pull off some of the greatest trick plays, including the Statue of Liberty and the flea flicker, and won the game. And actually took it overtime and won the game with a trick play. It was just one of the most magical, neat places ever to be on a football field. Again, it didn't matter to me who won or lost the game, but to be involved in something that was just that neat, to see that type of effort, it was just a great thing for college football. The best part about that whole weekend, I had my whole family out there, my 30-year-old daughter, my 28-year-old daughter, and my 25-year-old son and his wife. My wife and I never, we just got our 3 kids. There were no grandkids involved or anything. So the next morning at the hotel, we're having breakfast. We hadn't been together at Christmas, so we were exchanging Christmas presents. And so we got all done exchanging our Christmas presents, because my family's spread out all over the place. And my son and daughter-in-law said, oh, we got one more present for Mom and Dad. They handed us this little tissue paper wrapped thing. And I opened mine up real quick, you know what guys do with presents, you just rip them open. And I'm looking at a baby bib, and it said, I love Grandpa. And my wife gets one. And God bless her soul, she's a great lady in that, but things can really just kind of pass her by. And she looks at this, and hers says, of course, I love Grandma. And my wife looks at me and says, we're not grandparents. Now my daughter-in-law and my son are sitting there, and of course they're smiling from ear to ear, because my wife just made it so much better, not kidding. And I said, Tamara's pregnant. And she looked at Tamara, my daughter-in-law, and she says, are you pregnant? And Tamara's sitting there with this big smile, yeah. Well, that was the neatest thing in the world to be involved with Boise State and Oklahoma that night before. But I want to tell you something. Didn't compare to how I felt when I got that present that said, I love Grandpa. And I guess it brought back the realization to me about how important our families are. Our sports are important, obviously our football is important, but I hope that every one of you never lose sight of what families can mean and the importance of families. And that little Morgan now, who's 2.5, 3 years old, is just, Grandpa's just pride and joy, If I knew grandkids were so good, so great, I'd have had them first. just phenomenal. But to tie that in with football and that particular weekend to find out was just so special. I've had a lot of more ups with football than I've had downs. We have instant replay back in the States with college football. And I know there's a team here that probably wishes there was instant replay here at the tournament. And I tell you this about that too, but I was involved in the game back before replay came into college football with Illinois and Michigan. And I thought our crew for 58 minutes just knocked the socks off of this game. We had some of the toughest calls in the world, no replay, and the crew was really clicking on top of everything. Gave good game control in that. And in the last 2 minutes of the game, we kicked back-to-back fumble situations and turned the game upside down. And the score of the game changed. And Michigan, who was losing the whole time, came back and won a game at Illinois in the last seconds of the game. We do film review right after the game. We don't wait till we get home. We get the DVDs immediately, VHS tape. We were in and watching it after the game. And your heart's sinking when you find out that you or your crew has made a mistake like that that's possibly or surely impacted a game. And I know it doesn't make coaches or fans or players feel any better, but officials ache and pain over that too. I know it's hard for you to imagine this, but how serious they take it, how perfect they want to be. And when something like that happens, our crew that night probably had more to do with instant replay coming to college football than any other incident that happened in college football. It was 2 years later, the Big Ten was given the right to experiment with instant replay and was the first conference to do it. Now it's an accepted thing. So people say to me, do you like instant replay? And I said, I love instant replay. And you know why I love instant replay? Because if we have a chance to get it right on the field and do what's right for the players playing the game, then that's what we should do. We shouldn't just stew about it, talk about it, or any of the other things that go with it. We should do what we can to get it right and get it right on the field. Now, all that said, since I did mention it, and I don't do this at the expense of the team the other day that won the game or lost the game on the play at the end of the game. But I told you we spent a lot of time, an awful lot of time. So you can imagine that last night we spent a lot of time, I spent a lot of time with a copy of that tape, the only tape that we know that was available, and went through that. And here's the thing that you have to understand and realize. I told you I've been officiating since 1973. The rules regarding the passing game, what's the requirements of a catch by rule, have not changed one bit since 1973. But the philosophy on how we call catches has changed tremendously. Back when I started officiating, we treated the end zone different than the field of play. Not by rule, it was just this mindset that said, in the end zone, you didn't have to do as much because once you had it in the end zone, it was over. And that was a philosophy, not a rule. As I've officiated through the course of the last 30 years, the philosophy has shifted and changed. The philosophy has shifted and changed to say, to complete a catch, you have to secure the ball, you have to have minimally 1 foot down in bounds, and if there's an accompanying hit by an opponent or your own man, or you're going to the ground immediately, or both, you have to survive every part of it. You have to survive the hit, you have to survive the ground. If you don't, like a baseball player, roll over and show the official the ball, you don't necessarily have to do it like baseball. But if you don't have control of that football all the way through that action, from up here to down here to rolling over and hitting the ground, we want that called an incomplete pass. That's coming from the NFL, that's coming from the NCAA, that's coming from the National Federation. Now, just because we do it that way in the States, does that mean it has to be done that way everywhere? That's a good question, okay? But if football is going to, and I'm not saying that the only place to do that it's done right or the best football in the world is back in the States, but if more and more international opportunities are coming, it's important that the whole international community be on the same page with that. The European community's on the same page, the Japanese community's on the same page with that, and the Australian officials are on the same page with that. You can agree or you can disagree, okay? And again, I'm not saying this at the expense of the teams that won the game or lost the game. But I spent a lot of time on that footage last night. I'd call that pass incomplete. Was it difficult? Was it hard? Was it on the line with the game? All those things were there. But a decision was made and it was based on philosophy. That philosophy has come up because there were too many times over the last 20 years that we called too many passes catches and fumbles when they were really incomplete. So the powers to be, and I haven't made this up, this is the powers to be from the NCAA and from the NFL have said incomplete, incomplete, incomplete. Right? So I've looked at that call, and if I really in my heart of hearts felt that the call was wrong, they would have known it, you'd know it. But I have to stand here today, and I'm not saying it was an easy call. I'm saying by how the game is being called and how we're being taught to call it, it was an incomplete pass. And you can disagree with that and have your opinion, but I'm telling you, it's an incomplete pass. All right, let's go on to some other things and see if I can keep your attention now. Have I got everybody's attention? The next area of the game that I think is worth spending some time on is player safety. A thing that's crept into our game that we're not proud of is helmet-to-helmet contact. We have players who, they're bigger, faster, stronger than they've ever been. They've got better equipment than they've ever had. But they think they're invulnerable to injury. They think that all that great equipment and all that great weight training and all that things they do for strength, that they can't get hurt. They're Superman. Well, let me tell you, I've been out on football fields where I've seen helmet-to-helmet hits that were intentional, and I've seen helmet-to-helmet hits that have been accidental. I've been out on a football field with a 45-minute delay while a player was strapped to a stretcher. And he was taken out by ambulance with his mother came down out of the stands and stood next to him. And he was flown to a hospital. He was a potential #1 draft choice who's lucky he's going to come out of a wheelchair. And that one was accidental. He was the runner and he dipped his head. I've been out there where I've seen players launch and go up on punt return. Somebody's trying to catch a punt, and I've seen that guy launch up with the helmet and catch him under the chin, knock him senseless. I've been out on the field and I've seen it on the quarterbacks. I've been out there and people say, you know, it's just good football. You got a helmet on, you're one of the 11. You need to always be ready. There's no such thing as a defenseless player. And that's not true. Maybe back when I played the game, it was an accepted thing to go hit everybody everywhere. But it's not anymore. When that punter punts the ball and he's admiring his punt, he's just standing there, and the big defensive end decides to come in and just wipe him out, it's not roughing the kicker. Kick's gone, he's admiring the kick. But it's a hit on a defenseless player. Should he be ready? Sure he should. But that's a cheap shot. It doesn't belong in our game anymore. When the quarterback's throwing a pass and it's intercepted and he's on it and the return's coming back, and that defender, the defensive end, has lined him up and said, here's my chance to wipe the quarterback out. And they want to say, well, the quarterback was trying to make the tackle. Yeah, well, the interception was 30 yards over there, and the quarterback was just trying to show coach after he threw an interception that he was hustling. Jogging from here to here is not trying to make a tackle. You come in and wipe that quarterback out, you don't have to go helmet to helmet. You just annihilate him with a hard blindside hit. That's a defenseless player. You're going to get fouled for that. But the hits with the helmets and the launching that's going on is unbelievable. I wish I could show you the film that I showed the officials that showed about 7 or 8 violent hits. You knew and you might even, enjoy to watch it. But it probably, after you see about 2 or 3 of them, you'd say, I don't want to see anymore. I don't want to see anymore. The best response I saw, I went to Northwestern University. I do seminars for the coaches and the teams with new rule changes, points, emphasis. And I'm at Northwestern University. The coach is Pat Fitzgerald. And the whole team is in the audience. We put up on a big screen like this. I show a helmet-to-helmet hit that would just rock you where you were sitting. And of course, 65 players oohed and ahed and, hooted and hollered and the whole 9 yards. And before I could show the second play, Coach Fitzgerald said, Bill, can I come up on the stage and say something? I said, sure, it's your school, your stage. Coach Fitzgerald came up on the stage and he said, gentlemen, we don't play football that way at Northwestern University. And I'm praying that your opponent doesn't play football like that against you. But I don't want to stand in the hospital emergency room and explain to your mother and father why you're going to spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair. So I don't want to hear one more hoot and holler about this type of hit. We showed 2 or 3 more. We got the point across, and it was as quiet as it is now in that auditorium. I went down to another university, and to be kind to them, I won't name the university. And I showed the same film, and the same reaction came on the first play. And the coach from that university sat in the room with his arms crossed, and he just said, "It's good football."